only 3% of people my age group and about less than 5% of people between 20 and 60 were hitting the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines of 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week, with an average MET level of 3 METs, which is walking about 2.5, 2.7 miles per hour.
Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
Hi guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, the podcast that teaches you how to optimize your health, exercise, business, and lifestyle. My former guests include people like paleo pioneers Mark Sisson and Rob Wolf, zero-carb carnivores like Dr. Sean Baker, high-intensity strength training experts like Dr. Doug McGuff and Drew Bay, successful entrepreneurs, creatives, time management experts, and many, many more. My guest today is none other than Dr. Wayne Westcott, who myself and several others concur is possibly the most polite human being on earth and certainly one of the most pleasant people to talk to in the fitness industry. Dr. Westcott has written more than 20 books, 400 articles, and 600 newspaper columns on the topic of muscle building exercise. He has spent thousands of hours in the research lab, presented his findings to tens of thousands of seminar attendees, personally educated, tested, and certified many thousands of fitness trainers from around the globe and consulted to some of the most prestigious organizations interested in this business, included but not limited to the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, several National League football teams, General Motors Corporation, the Nautilus Corporation, and the President's Council on Sports and Physical Fitness. This was a really fun episode, one of the top researchers in strength training. We covered why should we be strength training for anti-aging, exercise recovery, and much, much more. For all of the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org. Don't forget to hang around at the end for your free gift from me. And now I give you Dr. Wayne Westcott. Dr. Wayne Westcott, it's an absolute honor to have you on my podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm so privileged. Thank you, Lawrence.
Good stuff. In preparation for this, I listened to a few of the podcasts you'd recorded previously. So you did one on the Fitness Candor podcast, which I thought was really good in terms of covering an overview of why we should be resistance training. So I will be linking to that in my blog post and the show notes for this, because I think it's good for people to get more context. And I try not to repeat the same content other people have done to try and create something unique where possible. That's not to put pressure on you to come up with unique answers. That's more down to me. What fascinates me is there's a number of scientists in your field that I really, really respect, including people like Dr. James Steele and James Fisher, who I know very well, and many other researchers who don't seem to have as high a profile as maybe people like Dr. Brad Schoenfeld and his colleagues who seem to do, maybe it's just my perception, a better job of marketing themselves. Yet I sometimes feel like researchers like yourself don't get the exposure and credit that you deserve. I don't know whether that's because I'm in a bubble, but how do you think about that? Why do you think that is, if that's even true?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think it depends on the organizations with whom you are associated, and the NSCA would be the largest organization in this country, and I am involved in NSCA. I write chapters for them in their textbooks, etc., and do presentations. But I'm not intimately involved with any one organization. I work closely with the American College of Sports Medicine. I write their health fitness column. I have for the last 6 years and speak at their conferences. I also work closely with ACE. We've written the strength training chapters for the American Council on Exercise personal training textbooks. So I kind of spread myself around. I'm not identify with any one organization quite as closely as some of the people that are pumping out a lot of very good research, but they have a little better connection perhaps than I do to do that. And they may be hitting on topics that are of greater interest in terms of what's hot at the present time. I pretty pretty basic and do a lot of basic things, which many people think, well, we already know all of that. And yet, if you look at it a little more closely, there are a lot of ramifications that might be important for them that they don't know. So we try to work in that area, especially, as you mentioned, with the benefits of resistance exercise.
That was well said. Yeah, I mean, I should also caveat what I said with I am based in Ireland, Galway in Ireland, and I'm from the UK, so I'm probably a little bit biased. And maybe if I were living in the US, I would be much more exposed to your work. So I will sort of caveat that. Let's talk about strength training, and just to give kind of an intro to some of the other things we'll touch on. Tell us the importance of strength training. Why should we be doing it?
It is so important to the average person because without resistance exercise in our very sedentary societies, our inactive lifestyles, the average American female loses 5 pounds of muscle every decade throughout the midlife years. And once she hits menopause, she loses up to 10 pounds of muscle every year. Now, that correlates also with a bone loss of about 10 to 15% during the midlife years every decade, and up to 20 to 30% every decade after menopause. Males are actually worse. Men lose, on average, about 7 pounds of muscle every decade if they're not doing some type of resistance exercise or strength building activity, which most men in our culture are not. So when they lose muscle, it has a major impact on their metabolic rate, their resting metabolism, which I think is the largest single factor with respect to obesity and the epidemic of overweightness, which I call overfatness. And that leads to, of course, diabetes, which leads to heart disease, which leads to a lot of other issues. So when you really think about it, if the biggest problem or one of the largest problems in the aging process is the loss of muscle and its ramifications, maybe we should do something to prevent the loss of muscle, or in fact, which we can certainly do, as you know, reverse the loss of muscle and bone and metabolism and all the problems that result from that. Muscle is very important. We can later go into the mitochondrial aspect and the myokines and those type of things. But muscle just basically is one of the most important parts of the human body. To be very simple, it is the engine. Your heart and circulatory system are very important. They're like the fuel pump of your body, but the muscles are where energy is released, where power is produced, where movement occurs. They're so important.
Yeah. Completely agree. And you mentioned there about going into mitochondrial health and also the myokine aspects, which were my next questions on that. So there was some research that came out, I think, a couple of years back in relation to reversal of gene expression, which has been touted as being one of the most interesting discoveries about why I guess we should be strength training. And a lot of people are seeing that as kind of like the fountain of youth in some respects. Can you talk to us a little bit about that study? I know you've obviously referenced it in a number of presentations, just so the layman can understand exactly what those implications are.
Absolutely. I'm going to learn more about that this May. I have the privilege of being on a panel of speakers, one of whom was from Mass University where that research was done, Dr. Mark Toplowski. And the other is the woman who's done so much of the research on myokines, Dr. Peterson, Bente Peterson, from Europe. So they'll be on that panel, and I'll learn a lot more about this. But from what I do understand, not having done the research myself, with the mitochondria, it was a 6-month study. They did 3 training sessions a week, 2 sets of 10 reps of, I believe it was 8 or 10 basic exercises that we'd all be familiar with performing. And these were people that were about my age, or about 68 years of age. And looking at about 180 different what they call genes related to activity and exercise and aging, they found that the genetic fingerprint for those 180 genes actually, I don't like the word reversed, but changed, so that after 6 months of doing the strength training program, they were essentially indistinguishable from the mitochondria of persons age 24. So,
Wow.
I'd gladly change my 68-year-old mitochondrial genes for a 24-year-old. Now, the 24-year-olds were not strength training, but I'd still take that. I'd like to have about 40 years younger, mitochondria in terms of the genetic makeup. That was really remarkable that strength training could do that. Now, many other studies have shown things that we couldn't previously explain with strength training, such as changes in gastrointestinal transit time and the changes in insulin resistance, those type of things. And that may be more related to the hormonal effect, the myokines, et cetera. But in terms of reversing gene profiles, that's pretty impressive stuff. And I think older adults should understand that strength training is probably more important for them than younger adults who don't have all the issues that people my age are dealing with on a degenerating basis progressively. So we do a lot of studies with people my age because we hope we have a few more good years to go if we just take care of ourselves properly, and it's not just going out for a walk, as you know, it's doing the resistance exercise.
And there's obviously a big blocker to people doing resistance training exercise, and it's something like, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but I remember you saying it was less than 5% people even did low level exercise, let alone resistance training. How do we go about increasing that number and getting more people involved in resistance training? What's been shown to motivate people to comply with this type of training?
Well, first, you're exactly correct in that the Centers for Disease Control in the United States and several other organizations put accelerometers on two groups, 5,000 each, of adults from every social strata and background and race, all those types of things, and they found that actually only 3% of people my age group and about less than 5% of people between 20 and 60 were hitting the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines of 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week, with an average MET level of 3 METs, which is walking about 2.5, 2.7 miles per hour. It's not that great of an effort level, and yet people were not making that a part of their lifestyle. Now, some people would say, well, that really wasn't fair. There are others that would train 3 days a week and they would do a good workout, or like yourself, training very intensely, infrequently. So it wouldn't be a perfect measure, but nonetheless, it indicates that most people are not doing any type of exercise, let alone resistance exercise. A similar study with 80,000 people that was done more with an interview style found that only 5% were really doing any major amount of exercise. So that number is fairly consistent in the studies. The reason for that, I assume, is because people do not understand how important strength training is. Walking and diet are very, very pervasive in our society. 70% of Americans, as we're speaking now, Lawrence, are following some type of a calorie-restricted diet to lose or maintain body weight, which obviously is not working because over 70% of Americans are overweight and about 85% are over fat and under muscled. But I think that the knowledge base with these benefits that you are so aware of and promoting is the best thing that we can do to engage people when they realize this would help you a lot more with a lot less time commitment, because time is always the reason given for not doing exercise. Strength training can be done, as you know, in a very brief, infrequent, basic manner. And although it takes more effort than going for a walk, especially if you stop, with a dog and talk and those type of things, it has so much more benefit.
So do you think it's primarily an educational thing, but also I think it's also because we're having to combat such bad messaging from mass media. So it's not only about getting good content out there to educate people on why there should be strength training and why dieting is quite unsuccessful, but it's also trying to reduce this awful useless information coming out of the kind of mass media machine.
Boy, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And I would agree with you 100%. You see diets promoted everywhere. You don't see in the general literature too frequently, other than persons like yourselves and the Fishers and the Steeles, and hopefully myself to some degree, information about the importance of doing resistance exercise.
You're so modest. Good. Okay. So I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of resistance training programming. I was watching a couple of your presentations, and one of the things you said is you talked about the benefits to resting metabolism when you train and how it remains elevated for 72 hours after training, which I knew about that, but I hadn't thought about how that might be beneficial. If you were to train twice a week, you would effectively get 6 days of increased resting metabolism.
Right.
And I thought that's really interesting, because obviously, if that's the case, you're pretty much burning, a ton more calories every week, or a fair amount more calories every week. And then that can obviously compound over time and have a very beneficial effect on your body composition. I'm just curious though, how does one balance that with recovery from training? So, there's some people think that you're better off reducing down to, say, one training session per week. But then you're perhaps not getting that benefit of increasing your resting metabolism. So how do we balance that for kind of maximum benefit, do you think?
Again, an incredibly good question, Lawrence. It's interesting to me that when you look at the data on metabolism, you'll find that Heaton's study, which looked at just 15 minutes, he also did a 35-minute. He did 3 sets and 1 set. They came out exactly the same, interestingly, in terms of the metabolic increase. But the 1 set performed in 15 minutes, according to his study, increased resting energy expenditure, which we're going to use as in a practical sense is the same as resting metabolic rate. They're not, but practically the energy expenditure is what we're looking at. So we found a 5% increase for 3 full days after the workout, which was a 15-minute workout, which is amazing. Interestingly, when Campbell and Hunter, who else am I trying to think of? Pratley, their research, where they did just a little bit more volume, they had a 7% increase for 3 full days. And then Hackney's research, where he did a killer workout, which I don't recommend, 8 sets of 8 exercises with 8 repetition maximum with beginners. I think they're probably still in the hospital, but they were elevated 9% for 3 full days. But interesting, so were the advanced people. 9% for 3 full days after workout. So maybe the volume is important. Maybe if they had a higher intensity at the other protocols, like the high intensity training that we've done so much research on, that may have been up to 7 or 9% as well. That hasn't been done at this point. But what I want to say is that in McCarthy's study, I believe it was McCarthy, looking at strength training recovery time specifically, not looking at energy expenditure, but looking at day 1, you do this workout. And they did 3 sets of 10 reps, as kind of a standard workout of 8 different standard exercises. And day 2, they were down. Their strength was down below baseline, way down, because they had done a lot of microtrial of the tissue. So Monday was their workout. Tuesday were way down. You don't want to pick a fight with somebody on Tuesday if you worked out really hard on Monday. Wednesday, which when I was young, you trained every other day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That was how you trained. But Wednesday, they were close to baseline, but only in one exercise, calf raise, where it's mostly a slow twitch muscle fiber type in your gastric knee, especially your soleus muscles, I should say. They were, all the other exercises were still a little below baseline after 48 hours. At 72 hours, all the average of all the exercises was significantly above baseline. You had recovered. You'd surpassed your baseline level. This was a good thing. That's where you want to take your next workout, at the peak of your muscle remodeling process, or rebuilding, if you want to call it that. What was very interesting was that at 96 hours, 4 days after the workout, they had not changed. They were still at that same level above their baseline. So they didn't continue the research beyond that. That's a really hard study to do. That type of a protocol is very, very difficult. I don't know how they even did it as well as they did. But for 72 to 96 hours after a single workout, they were at the peak of their muscle remodeling process. Well, that would correspond to the other studies, which again only went for 3 days. But you're still at a very high energy expenditure because you're rebuilding the muscles until that time. So those two studies to me correlate very well. The time that it takes to get to your peak muscle remodeling, and also the time that your resting metabolic is elevated because of the rebuilding processes. No studies have looked at longer than the 96 hours. My guess is it would still be somewhat elevated as it decays back towards baseline even 5 days later. So yourself and other people that train very intensely, but also the other side of the stage, the bodybuilders who nowadays do one body part for 2 hours on Monday, another body part for 2 hours on Tuesday. Apparently, you can get by with a fairly long time in between workouts because your body responds so well to a good workout if you give it time. If you don't give it time, and most of us do not give it enough time, I'm guilty of that. I'm a very anxious person when I get my workouts. I'm very disappointed that as I got older, I could not train as frequently because it takes a little longer, and the study showed that also, by the way, that as you get older, recovery time is delayed. But we really need, as you know so well, and Doug would support in his book, of course, is that recovery time after a good workout is probably the most important thing that you can do.
Right. Okay. As you're talking there, questions are coming up for me, and then you're just picking them off and answering them anyway. But I was going to ask you, there are some people that would advocate, recovery periods as long as 10 days between workouts. And I appreciate that's highly context dependent. It depends on the stresses in one's life and things like that. Do you think there's much scientific evidence to suggest that one might need that much recovery time between workouts?
In terms of the research, and I get a lot of research journals. I don't get all of them, of course, but I get quite a few. I've never seen any research that has looked at from an academic perspective, at that long of a rest and recovery period. It may work for various individuals, and it may work better for certain muscle groups than others. For example, fast twitch muscle fibers, fast twitch motor units, which would be triceps are up to 80% fast twitch. Fast twitch fibers fatigue quickly and recover quite slowly. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, gastrocnemius, your soleus, which can be up to about 80% slow twitch. Slow twitch fibers fatigue slowly and recover very quickly. So depends on the muscle, depends on the individual, a lot of differences. But for myself, I really like strength training. I mean, I train pretty hard, not as hard as you. I'm an old man, but I train pretty hard, and I still look forward to. I don't train long period. I have a fairly brief training protocol, but I like to train twice a week. So I do Wednesdays and Saturdays. And again, based on that research, if you're at your peak between 3 and 4 days after the workout, I have a 4-day recovery from Saturday to Wednesday, and I have a 3-day recovery from Wednesday to Saturday. So hopefully I'm hitting my peak at those times if I don't do something crazy in between, like go for a hard cycle with my friends or something like that, and use up so much of my recovery energy. But and life goes on. There are other things in life besides strength. I understand that. But I think twice a week works very, very well for most individuals, and certainly for people over age 50. They can't do the same muscle groups. I'm talking about a total body workout here, of course. They can't do the same muscle groups every other day and continue to progress. We've seen that, although we haven't studied it, we have seen it in individual cases time and time again. When people at about 50 or 55 or at least 60, your recovery does slow down.
Why is that?
Well, I wish I knew. I believe that everything deteriorates to some degree as we get older. For example, I don't mean to get off topic here, but just to give an example of that, if you are 35 and you eat 100 grams of protein today, your body might process, say, 80 of those grams. So some of it's going to go out in the urine, but you might process, if you ate it throughout the day and didn't take it all at one time, you might process 80 grams of protein, which is good because you need that for building muscle and bone and lean tissue and hormones and everything else. If you're my age, if you're 65 and you eat 100 grams of protein today, your body might process 40 of those, about half as much as when you were younger. I wish I knew the reasons. I do know the results. But the other thing, just everything seems to slow down the muscle rebuilding and recovery. Because if you don't process proteins as well, or other things that would be necessary in terms of rebuilding muscle, it's not there. It takes longer to do that. A lot of our most recent research is looking at higher protein intake throughout the day, and also taking protein at the time of the workout to make sure you don't have a negative protein balance for 2 or 3 hours after your workout, especially with older adults. But I honestly don't know the answer, but I'm just saying that I do know from other research in other fields that things happen as you get older which are not particularly beneficial, and so you have to take things just a little bit slower. I also know that you need to do a little more warm-up before you can hit your peak performance. It takes a little while to adjust to each workout. You can say, well, you've been doing it for 50 years now. You should have this down. I know, but it just takes a little longer as you get older. You'll realize that in about 40 years, Lawrence.
And now it's time for a quick break. Join me this year on the 9th and 10th of March 2018 at the Resistance Exercise Conference, the science and application of strength training for health and human performance. We are going to be joined by some amazing speakers, including Dr. Michelle Seager. Dr. Seager is a leading exercise motivation scientist and best-selling author of No Sweat: How the Simple Science of Motivation Can Bring You a Lifetime of Fitness. A keynote speaker this year at the Resistance Exercise Conference, Dr. Seager's insights on fitness motivation have been changing the conversation around the globe on how we should be promoting healthier behaviors, and her science-based, easy-to-use methods are being adopted in next-generation behavioral design and across fitness, wellness, and healthcare contexts. Every Resistance Exercise Conference attendee will be receiving a free copy of her book. At the event, you will learn from the top strength training researchers, connect with exercise professionals from all over the world. You'll get a workout from an expert trainer and get inspired, rejuvenated, and focused on your strength training business. You'll get the chance to chat with guys like Dr. James Fisher, Luke Carlson, and Jim Flanagan. I will be in attendance with many of the Corporate Warrior listeners, and I'd love to meet you in person. To get 10% off your entry fee, head on over to resistanceexerciseconference.com and enter the coupon code CorporateWarrior10 in PayPal. So again, head on over to resistanceexerciseconference.com, get 10% off by using Corporate Warrior 10 in PayPal, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Now back to the show. How does your protocol look like in terms of the warm-up? Like, what are you training to failure? Can you walk us through like your workouts?
Yes, I always try to train to failure. I just been brought up that way, and it seems to work well. Now, my level of failure is typically a concentric level of failure. So, for example, if I were doing the abdominal machine, all right, and I do 10 good reps with, let's say I do 160 pounds, which is neither here nor there. It depends on the machine, of course. I'm not that super strong or anything, but I would do 10 good reps. If it's a rush day, if I'm not feeling my best, I say that was good, and I move on to the next machine. I go to the low back machine, okay? If I'm feeling pretty good, and if I know I need to do it, I immediately do what we call breakdown training. I immediately reduce the resistance from 160 to 140, and I do as many additional reps as I can in good form, which is usually 5. Okay, I get 5, and then I'm kind of hurting at that. And so here's the difference. The next day, if I just did the 10 reps, I feel fine. I feel good. I feel like I had a good workout, but my abs are not sore at all. Just maybe a teeny bit. If I do that one breakdown, again, you may have to do 2 or more, etc. But if I do just that one breakdown set and push it at the point where my fast twitch fibers are pretty fatigued, but I've still got some slow twitch functioning, if I can push those slow twitch to fatigue or a little deep level fatigue, I am not only sore for one day, but for at least 2 days and sometimes 3 after that simple adjustment of hitting my muscles, hitting those fibers when they are most receptive to being pushed to a deeper level of fatigue and therefore a deeper level of stimulus. So that'd be one example of how to make my workout more effective and still keep the time. I mean, 5 reps, I can do that in 30 seconds. It's not going to add a lot of time to my workout. I normally, if I'm using machines, which I do, I normally do one set. But when I'm using machines that have heavy weights, like a leg press machine, where, after all these years, I can do the whole weight stack, of course, and you could do that, and most everybody else could do it who trains hard. But I don't want to start out with the whole weight stack. It's just too much. So all that inertia, overcoming the inertia, the first repetition is very hard. So I warm up. I do a warm-up set, or maybe even 2 progressive warm-up sets before I get to that heavy weight. So I've done 2 sets or 3 sets, but I've done 1 stimulus set, and I'm ready for it, and I don't get hurt. And I still use my hands to help me overcome the inertia on the first one. I push on my knees. I cheat. But when you're my age, you'll do that too. And then after that, I'm fine. And the next, 15 reps are done pretty sensitive. But that's just an idea of how I would do my workouts. When I do free weight training, I have nothing against free weights at all. I just don't find them to be quite as efficient. I find it effective but not as efficient. I may do an extra set or 2. Don't yell at me, but that just being honest.
No, it's great because I forgot to tell you this, but a large number of my listeners are kind of older demographic, so kind of over 45. So this is probably quite valuable for them. What do your workouts look like? Like, what exercises do you do on the Wednesday and Saturday? How often do you change those? That type of thing.
Oh, darn. I have to reveal my secrets. I don't change very often. When I get a good routine, I stick with that routine. And I want to tell you something. We just did a research study, just sent out to the reviewers. And the reviewers were asking good questions. They said, well, we did a research study where people did 9 resistance machines. All right. 3 for the legs, 3 for the upper body and arms, and 3 for the, what we call we call them the spinal column muscles, but your lower back, abdominals, your obliques, those type of things. So they did 9 exercises, and they did the same. They did 1 set of 9 exercises, 8 to 12 reps for 15 months. And the reviewer said, how could they do that? What kind of motivation did you give them? What kind of reinforcement? And we didn't. There was no extrinsic reinforcement. The only motivation was they kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's a study in which we had 6 months of weight loss, and they did awesome. They not only lost significant weight, but it's one of the very few studies where they concurrently lost fat and added muscle. Most studies, the weight that is lost is 75% fat and 25% muscle. This study, the weight that was lost was 125% fat, and they didn't lose muscle. They actually added muscle. They 25% additional muscle compared to the start. So then we continued that for another 9 months of a maintenance program. And they did the same 9 exercises, 1 set, 8, 12. They didn't get bored because it didn't take that long. How can you get bored doing 1 set of an exercise, for heaven's sakes? And they kept getting results. So during a maintenance period, this is the only study, to my knowledge, that's ever seen this. During a 9-month maintenance period, they didn't lose any more weight. They aren't supposed to. They're supposed to maintain. They maintained their weight. There was no significant increase in the weight. But they continued to lose fat and build muscle. So although my friends would say, well, if you change exercise, you would have better results, that's probably true. I would say this, that if you have a good routine, it will work. If you train the muscles through their full range at a controlled speed with progressive resistance, they're going to get stronger.
Why is that true?
Well, because the muscles really only know one thing. They're stimulated to contract and do what they do. They bring 2 bones, typically, closer together or farther apart. So my biceps, it doesn't matter if I'm using my biceps with a seated curl, a standing curl, a concentration curl, an incline curl, a preacher bench curl, name it. It doesn't even matter if I'm doing a chin up or a pull down or a seated row. My biceps pretty much, I understand they do more. They connect over the shoulder and they help you with shoulder flexion. But typically they do one thing. They flex the elbows. They also supinate, but they flex the elbows. So in all those exercises, they're going to do one thing. Say, okay, I'm involved in a pull down, but my job is to flex the elbows. The lats are extending the shoulders, but my job is to flex the elbows. So I think sometimes although psychologically it's good to change exercises unless you're kind of a dum-dum like me that likes doing the same thing over and over. But physiologically, if you're training the muscle, it does what it's supposed to do. And if you train it hard, it says, wow, that was challenging. I've got to rebuild a little bit stronger than I was last time and maybe add a little more tissue here so I can do that better in the future. And again, I don't do all the same exercise all the time. I do periodically change things. But over the years, there's certain things I like. and so I do them, and it makes me feel good. And I'm not getting any stronger at my age, but I'm not losing it very quickly either, which, thank God, I look at my friends and colleagues who don't strength train, and I say, oh, thank you, Lord, that I strength train, that I know enough to do this, because it does make a big difference.
Don't they see you and say, because you look great. I mean, Luke's right. You look 20 years younger than you actually are. So I'm not just saying that because we're talking. So don't your friends look at you and they say, what are you doing? Teach me how you do that. Aren't they interested in that?
Yes, you really hit it. I did some major work in role modeling when I was a doctoral student at Ohio State University, and it is such a powerful impact. And you know this, when you look at the advertisements, you're talking about the media and the advertisements for dining, they'll always show you, here's a picture of Mrs. Smith before, and here's a picture of Mrs. Smith after. Now, that may or may not have been Mrs. Smith or not, as you know, but even though there's no research, and she may have been only one out of 100 people that made that result, they see this, oh, that could be me. So it's kind of the modeling factor. Now, that may or may not be altogether accurate or honest, but when they see you or they see me and they see you at the gym, they see you say, what do you do to stay in such a, well, you say you train all the time. You must train about 3 or 4 hours a day. You're in exercise science. You must train all day. No, I actually don't train. I sit at a desk most of the day. But when I do train, I train hard and I train briefly. And you can do the same thing. Let me show you how. And that has been probably the best means of us getting people into our program, myself and my staff and my faculty that work here, to try and be good role models for people. And then those people hopefully go out and they become role models. And there's I don't know if that's a trickle down or a trickle up. I'm not very politically inclined here, but it's a good thing when people see that happening. Unfortunately, it only happens in certain places. As you know, the people that train the way that you train are certainly in the minority.
Yes. I've been told a number of times that I'm a little bit of an outlier when it comes to training motivation. Earlier, when you were talking about your training protocol, you said people have said to you, if you changed your program, if you changed your exercises, you might get better results. And you said that could be true. And I sort of butted in and said, why is that true? And I kind of interrupted your flow pattern. But I'm just curious. I mean, do you really think that we do actually need to change exercises to get optimal results? Or do you think actually, one can practice pretty much the same routine almost indefinitely? And so long as they are using, progressive resistance, there's not going to be much difference.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of bodybuilders and powerlifters over the years, and also a lot of professional football teams in the National Football League. And I know bodybuilders who do the same exercises over and over. They've got a routine they like. Doug Brignoli does this, incredibly successful. Bodybuilder without, to the best of my knowledge, without the steroids and those type of things. He's won pretty much all the titles. And then there are other bodybuilders who change things all the time. I'll give you another example. When I trained with the NFL teams at that time, probably about 10 years ago or so, 1/3 of the teams in the NFL, a little over 1/3, were doing machine exercises, pretty much the high-intensity training, 1 to 2 sets at the most, with the techniques that we, breakdown training, assisted training, those type of things, pre-exhaustion training. During those eras, they won more Super Bowls than all the other teams. And if the other teams were doing a very high volume protocol, and pendulum swings, now they've won more Super Bowls. But it works both ways as long as you work progressively and somewhat intensely. And again, high volume people can work intensely. We look at that a little differently, but it's if you have the time and you're interested in doing that, it certainly will work. We see that happening. But our and I kind of got off track there. I apologize, but I think you can do it either way, and again, I'm off track. I'm sorry, Lawrence. The question that you originally asked me, I got off on a tangent there.
No,
Can you
no,
just...
no, it's absolutely fine. No, I was just kind of asking you, do you really think that there is much difference in outcomes if you change protocol?
It may depend on the person. For me, I can stay with the same program and get pretty good results. If you look at powerlifters who are arguably very, very strong individuals, they're doing the same exercises every year. They may do supplementary exercises, but they're doing squats, they're doing bench presses, they're doing deadlifts, and they're still getting stronger. Same with the Olympic lifts. I'm not a big Olympic lifting fan because I know the injury rate's about 85% for Olympic lifters. That's too much for me to do, but I do admire the skill and the abilities they have. But they're doing the same exercises. That's what they get. That's what they have to do to participate in their event. I don't know that you have to change as frequently as possible. I do believe this. You need to hit all of your major muscle groups. And if you can't do that on your 2 basic workouts per week, you may have some auxiliary workouts where you say, well, we think, for example, that the neck is very, very important. It holds up your 15-pound head, 18 hours a day if you get 6 hours of sleep, or 16 hours a day if you get 8 hours of sleep. And we think that's very important for older adults. So we always try to get the neck exercise in there. People say, why would you do that? So why would you not do that? It's the only muscle that works most of the day when you're sitting. It's holding your head up. So we'll do auxiliary work, which we may not count in our basic 9 exercise, but we normally do I normally do about 9 basic exercises on a regular, routine.
So you train your neck, you do that yourself as well, yeah, for your personal
I do. You can see my neck, and it's always been scrawny. I'm a pencil neck. I'm on the Nautilus neck machine. I use 170 pounds. Nobody uses 170 pounds. I still don't get big neck muscles. So genetics plays a role, but at least my neck is strong. I've been rear-ended, and thank God I had a strong neck, because that whiplash can really do some serious damage. But in the Boston area, sometimes you get rear-ended. It's crazy drivers here, Lawrence. And I was just so thankful that I'm really glad that I do my neck exercises. So they don't look very big, but they're deep down underneath there's some strong neck muscles. Yeah, I do them twice a week.
I was going to bring this up later, but I just have to make sure I get this into this interview. Let me know if you can still hear me clearly.
Yes, I can. It's just that this is falling off.
That's all right. So I had an injury yesterday. I play basketball once a week, and I tore my calf muscle yesterday. I think I pulled it or a very mild tear. But it was so bad that I had to come off the court and go straight. Wait till the session ended. Then I was driven to accident emergency just to get it checked over rather than go home, because I'm not an expert. I had James Fisher and James Steele on Facebook Messenger trying to give me advice. I asked them for advice, which is always useful. But I've been thinking about this, and I know that injury is so hard to pinpoint. But I wonder if there's a number of factors that may have caused it. So I actually did a leg press on Saturday, and I didn't quite go to failure. Not because I didn't want to, but because I actually couldn't cope with the discomfort, because I've only just switched from bodyweight training, having done bodyweight for over a year, using Drew Bay's protocols, to going back to machines. And it was amazing how difficult it was because of the transition, and I hadn't done it for so long. And I wondered, could I have had this injury as a result of not, strength training on the Saturday, going straight into competitive basketball Sunday night? Maybe there's a little bit of overtraining. Skylar Tanner made the point that I maybe should have warmed up better. I'm also wondering if I had some prolonged sitting the day of before basketball. I'm wondering if these factors kind of accumulated to cause injury, because I know a lot of it's down to chance, but I'd be really fascinated to hear what your thoughts are on that.
That is, first, I'm sorry about your injury. I've had those. I just injured my Achilles, and I couldn't figure out why, but it was a confluence of different things that kind of set me up. And, That thank God, doesn't happen too often. Otherwise, we'd be injured all the time. But this was the case with my Achilles, and it's still a little sore. I feel okay about that because our star football player in the United States is Tom Brady from the New England Patriots, who's won so many Super Bowls. He's got a sore Achilles too, and he's been probably missed 2 days this week. So we'll see how he does tonight. But the Achilles and the calves, the toughest tissue in your body. But when it's weakened, the injuries are usually severe. Especially the Achilles is your thickest, tendon in the body, fibrous tissue. But it takes a long recovery period because there's a very low blood supply. So the recovery for Achilles injuries and calf injuries is usually a little bit longer. So be cautious. I would say it probably was a variety of things. But I will say this. I meant to say this earlier, and I forgot. I got off track there. And here's what I wanted to say, Lawrence. When you hit a plateau, which we all do, hopefully we know some high-intensity techniques to get us off that plateau. But if you hit a plateau and you're really stuck, the best thing you can do is stop that exercise and go to one that works the same muscle groups but involves the muscle fiber recruitment in a slightly different manner. So if you're stuck on bench presses, go to inclines or go to dips or go to declines or go to push-ups or go to something that works the pecs. But it's a little different recruitment pattern for the motor unit because when you change exercises, number one, you're going to be weaker because you haven't done it. You're not used to doing it. But you will get stronger quickly. In the first month of doing a new exercise, about 80% of what looks to be, oh my gosh, I'm getting so strong. I went from 300 pounds in this leg press to 400 pounds. I went up 100 pounds. Well, 80% of that 400 pounds was neurological. It was recruiting the right fibers, reminding them, okay, this is a new exercise. I'm not doing, body weight squats. I'm doing leg presses. That's a little different movement pattern, different recruitment of motor units. And that neurological pattern, we call that motor learning, that makes up about 80%. We've done research on this ourselves, but that's consistent in all the motor learning literature. About 80% of the apparent new strength, not mass is mass, but the apparent new strength gains is neurological or neuromuscular, not so much new muscle tissue. So that might be a good reason if you hit a plateau to change exercise, just to say, okay, I want to see some progress again, psychologically and physiologically, using maybe a little different motor unit recruitment, the same muscles, but in a different recruitment pattern. So again, I'm not against changing exercise or going from body weight to machines or machines to free weights or things of that nature. There are a lot of things you can do in that regard. But with that injury, I'm guessing that sitting and then going to kind of a different exercise where there's a little different pressure on the calves when you're pushing against something. If you watch people doing a leg press, you watch those calf muscles engage. They engage. I'm not kidding you. They really do. They have to maintain that angle, that position to keep your knee tracking properly. There's a little more pressure on your Achilles and your calves doing that. And then when you go to something explosive, like going up for a rebound or whatever in the basketball, or even just landing, not so much the jumping, but the landing and having to decelerate very quickly, which puts a lot of stress. That's why I injured my Achilles. I'm sure I was doing sprints. Now, if I went any slower, I'd be going backwards. But I was trying to do sprints, but I was decelerating too quickly, and I knew it. I felt it. I said that was it. So a lot of things, and I'm not a doctor, and James are far more expert at this than I am, believe me. But that. They probably hit it right, and you hit it right, and I wish you a good recovery.
Yeah, you're right. I'm just trying to recollect, and I think I was sprinting on a fast break, and then I deaccelerated, and then it just popped. I felt it pop literally, and then I was like, damn. I've never done the injury before. I mean, I've rolled my ankle in the past, like many basketball players have, but not this. So no, I appreciate the advice, and I'm going to be far more thoughtful about my training going forward. I'm still fairly young. I'm 30, but I do kind of want to do this for life, so I don't want to injure myself more than I have to. Right, so time is ticking on, but I just really want to get your thoughts on resistance training programming for optimal gains. What are your, a lot of people listening to this are, hard gainers or people who are really striving to build as much muscle mass as their genetics will allow. Naturally. And I just wondered, what are your general recommendations for programming a protocol for optimal gains over the long term?
Okay, thank you very much. I would suggest, this is what we do, and we've done it for for 25 or 30 years, we haven't changed. And I give Arthur Jones a lot of credit for coming up with these principles. The American College of Sports Medicine, for many, many issues of their guidelines, actually went with his original, one set, 8 to 12 reps, slow speed, full range, training relatively infrequently and training to failure. Recently, they've gone to more of a multi-set protocol, but certainly it works well. I'm not saying it's the absolute best. I don't know what the best is. I'm not sure who does. And again, it depends on a lot of genetic factors who you're dealing with. But we have used the single set, roughly 8 to 12 reps. We do that not because it's 10 plus or minus 2, but we've done a lot of research on sets and reps and frequency. And we found that most people in most exercise, leg press is an exception because of overcoming that initial inertia. There's so much inertia on that. But for everything else, plus it's a Lombard's paradox of a muscle contraction, co-contraction of opposing muscle groups, the quads and the hams, etc. But for every other exercise, if you're doing machines or every other exercise except for squats, if you're doing free weights, most people will do about 12 reps with 70% of their maximum. So if your maximum is 100 pounds, take 70, you'll do about, 11, 12, 13, roughly 12 reps with that. Most people will do 8 reps with about 80% of their maximum. So if your max is 100, you give 80 pounds, you're going to do 7, 8, 9, but you're going to be pretty close to 8 reps. So training between 70 and 80% of maximum seems to be a very effective area and range in which to train, and it's also one that doesn't seem to be too hard on the joints. For older individuals, it's the joints that give out, not so much the muscles. The muscles are very elastic, forgiving, but the tendons, ligaments, as you know from your injury, and the joint structures themselves are problematic. So the 70 to 80% works really well. Does 90% work? Of course it does. Does 6% work? Yes. And there's Stuart Phillips and my heroes there from McMaster. They would say you can go down, under 50%, still get good results. Body weight, as long as you go to fatigue, and I don't disagree with them, believe me. But I would suggest that the 70 to 80%, 8 to 12 reps, is a very sensible range in which to train. And when you can get 12 good reps, that's your signal to increase the resistance, because really strength training is about progression and intensity, obviously, but you have to progress. Otherwise, your body adapts to what you're doing. With beginners, 2 or 3 days a week, if they're doing a total body workout, we had 1,700 subjects in this study. That's a lot of subjects. They both gained 3.1 pounds of muscle in 10 weeks, and they lost about 3.9 pounds of fat. It was no significant difference. But once you get stronger, even me, because I'm so old, you can't go twice a week. You can't recover, as I said before in the studies there, that you have to go give your body at least every muscle group at least 72 to 96 hours recovery between work. As I shouldn't say everyone, because your slow twitch muscles would be exceptions. But pretty much you need to give that recovery time. When it comes to speed of movement, we did the original research studies on super slow. I'm not a super slow person. You can tell I'm just too anxious about everything. But I did it for 9 months before I did the study to make sure it worked. And boy, did it work. It worked really well. I hated every minute of it. I'm not a super slow person. But we did studies. We did 2 because I didn't believe the results of the first. Those who did the slow training, slowed things down from a 4-second concentric to a 10-second concentric in 2 separate studies with 75 people each, had 49% in one study and 51% in the other study greater strength gains during a 10-week period than those who did not. That's pretty impressive. So I don't go that slow, but we do a 6-second reps, 3 seconds lifting, 3 seconds slowing. Now that you go into almost any gym, you're not going to see that, but they see it in our gym. Make the muscles do the work. Use muscle and not momentum. Full range, we're pretty adamant about that, especially for older adults. The research on the low back, for example, 90% of people my age have low back issues. With low back, again, Dr. Fulton and Dr. Fulton, I should say him, Dr. Pollack did the research at the University of Florida. And they found that if you don't go the full range in the low back, you don't develop full range strength, and you don't get any relief to the low back issues because that full range is really important. So just those basic guys. Relatively infrequent training of 2 or say 2 times a week for the major muscle groups, 8 to 12 repetition, which means you're working at 70 to 80% of maximum. Single set, if you want to do more sets, I'm not against that by any means. There's no studies that show that 2 or 3 sets doesn't work as well as 1, but there are a lot of studies that show that 1 works as well as 2 and 3, and it's much more efficient. So people can make that choice however they want. And then controlled movement speeds, full movement range, and gradual progression.
That's great advice. What have you changed your mind about regarding exercise in the last year or so, or in recent memory?
Very good question. I'm going to make enemies with this one. I apologize. But I was brought up and I was taught all my life that if you eat the normal American diet, you get plenty of protein. You get lots of protein. But as I started looking at the research on that, the best nutrition researchers in this nation, Wayne Campbell and his associates, are saying that no, and they've done the research on this at Tufts and at other major universities. They found that if you are eating the RDA for protein, even though you're doing the best strength training workout you can, that there is, if you're over 50, you're still going to lose muscle. You have to eat 25% more protein daily than the RDA to maintain your muscle with strength training. If you want to build muscle, and again, I'm sure they're rounding this a little bit, but if you want to build muscle, they're recommending 50% more than the RDA to build muscle if you're over 50. And again, you said a lot of your listeners are in that range, so I'm going to go with that. At the same time, that information came out, some studies from Australia and other places show that if you take extra protein at the time of your workout, within a half hour before or a half hour after, you get better gains if you take that protein, not in close time proximity to your workout, but at other times of the day. And so we've done several studies on that. And in our studies, not everybody's, but in ours, and a lot of them that we've reviewed, because we've been asked to review this and publish it for ACSM and other journals, that has been the case. You do get better results. We've looked at it in terms of fat loss, in terms of muscle building, and in terms of bone mineral density. And we found that in every case, those that took a reasonable amount, 25 extra grams of protein just after or just before the workout, had significantly better results in terms of, again, the bone mineral density didn't reach significance, but was close. The muscle building and the fat loss, which are key things that most older adults are worried about. I got to get rid of the fat. I need to get my muscle back if they're enlightened about this at least, and I want to build bone. So we're recommending, and most of our studies recommending about 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day. That's about 50% more than the general recommendation of 0.4 grams per pound. Now, the recommendations are 0.8 grams per kilogram, and so we go to about 1.4, 1.5 grams per kilogram. But just for people that don't want to make that exchange, about 0.6 to 0.7 grams per pound per day. We've never had any issues with that. And in numerous studies, we've had excellent results with a little more protein. Now, if you're taking more protein, you have to take more water. Water is good, doesn't add pounds. It's probably the best nutrient we have. We can't go very long without it. So plenty of water, a little extra protein. And again, it's a little controversial, and I never thought about I never did supplements in my life, and I still don't, but I do take a little extra protein per day, and I always take a protein shake before my workout. Maybe it's psychological, but it seemed to help a little bit.
No, that's really interesting. I've seen some of the research from Dr. Stuart Phillips, group on protein consumption, and I've significantly increased my own consumption. I'm currently probably close to 2 grams per kilogram.
Oh, okay, good.
But that's more of an N=1 mass gain experiment that I'm sort of just starting, although that's been somewhat stalled by this injury. I'm actually on crutches, which is a bit of a shame, but I'm hoping I actually can walk on it, but I look like a bit of a velociraptor, so the crutches kind of help. So I'm hoping to get back on it in perhaps a couple weeks once I've recovered. But Wayne, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and your work?
I'm not, as you mentioned, I'm not very good at promoting myself. I don't really have a website. One of my co-authors put me on his website a few years ago, but that's pretty old. I think I haven't added any information to it. Basically, I'm a friendly person. I love being a resource to people. If anyone contacts me by phone or by email, I always respond. I answer my emails. People say, well, here's my training program. Can you help me? And I can only do so much because of time, but I try to give good information. I send research publications that would have that information in them, some that I've actually done with James and James recently, which is a great honor to be on a research publication with them, believe me. Or I'll send them stuff from Stuart Phillips or his group. They just do such great research. But if people contact me in any manner, even if they write me, I will get back to them. I'll send them everything that I can. I need to do a better job of getting into life in the 21st century here with computers and those type of things and websites. But I'm not there yet, so please forgive me. But if anyone does want to contact me, I'll get right back to them.
I'm sure people understand, and I'm sure people don't expect you to be able to respond to every email because, your greatest leverage is in doing the great work you do and the research, and that's how you're going to help the most people. So I think it's up to people like me and the kind of more hobbyists among us and then laymen to actually share your work and provide that kind of middleman type of role.
Well, thank you.
No, you're welcome. And for everyone listening, for the blog posts for this episode and the blog posts for all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org. And until next time, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Before you head off, head on over to corpwarrior.com, that's CORP warrior.com, to get your free high-intensity training Google Progress chart and ebook with 6 interview transcripts of some of my top guests, including Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, and Bill Simone, on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health in an efficient, effective, and sustainable way. These transcripts are deliberately not verbatim. Instead, they've been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to quickly pick out what you need and start getting results. To get your ebook, head on over to corpwarrior.com, enter your email address, then check your email for an email from me with a confirmation link. Once you click the link, you will be instantly redirected to a PDF version of the transcripts. This episode is brought to you by the Resistance Exercise Conference, the science and application of strength training for health and human performance. Would you like to learn from the top strength training researchers, network and connect with other exercise professionals from all over the world, join a welcome reception on a Friday night to build relationships with other strength training professionals, experience an early morning workout from an expert trainer to kickstart your Saturday, and get inspired, rejuvenated, and focused on your strength training business? I certainly do, and that is why I am attending and interviewing all of the speakers at the event. The Resistance Exercise Conference will be held on the 9th and 10th of March 2018 in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Commons Hotel. To get 10% off your entry fee, head on over to resistanceexerciseconference.com, click the registration button, and enter Corporate Warrior 10 in the promo code field in PayPal. I'm very excited about this and I've wanted to attend for years. Sign up now at resistanceexerciseconference.com and get 10% off with promo code Corporate Warrior 10, and I look forward to meeting you in person.